Docious Biden trying to make a big comeback, even with terrible poll numbers. After a week of resting up at the beach in Delaware, the president finally thinks he has the wind at his back. He's gearing up for a victory tour of the country to tout some legislative wins, and his White House Chief of Staff, Ron Klain, is already out there with the trash talk.
I don't think it's true he's out there less than his predecessors. I just think Donald Trump created an expectation of a president creating a storm every single day. And that led to a cycle of cable news coverage and Twitter and so on and so forth. And I understand that made people in your line of work, very busy and very productive.
The media ramping up the Biden hype machine. New York Times is trying to make the pro-Biden Dark Brandon meme a thing with this headline quote, "Dark Brandon rises and buoys Biden's beleaguered faithful." The Times also claiming Aviator Joe is back, arguing the president's shades are an emblem of his continued vigor. And check out these lapdogs.
This is a big thing on deal. It is a big deal. This is huge, and I don't think people understand how big this is.
This has been an extraordinarily successful 2 years legislatively.
Big victory at the White House.
Yeah, it's such a big win for President Biden. He's actually interrupting his vacation and flying back to the White House today just for this bill signing.
Tyrus, listen, I don't know what you would know about things like using props to present yourself, to have a persona, to create an air about you, a perception, but you've shown that can work outside of the ring, but I don't know that Biden's going to make aviators work outside the movies.
Here's the thing. Either you got the charisma or charisma, as we say in the biz, to where you can wear a cardigan and have someone tell you it looks like a sweatshirt and still be all right. You either have it or you don't. And with all due respect, Mr. President, the brother don't. He doesn't have it. So I don't care how you dress it up. Glasses, Dark Brandon, whatever, he's still shaking hands with ghosts and doing all kinds of weird stuff. And to say he has wins with what's going on right now is just unbelievable. There is enough Chinese fentanyl in this country, literally a stat I was reading today, to kill Americans 7 times over. Our border crisis is unbelievable. Our inflation, people looking around. He has spent total of 5 months so far outside of the office, which is the most of the last 3 presidents. So to say he's present, to say he's doing anything, he's stopping his vacation to come back because this is the first positive thing he's had to where they have to come back for him to do the bill signing. If he was doing so well, he wouldn't have to stop and be like, hey, look what I did. Check me out. Put my glasses on and whatnot, because his poll numbers, the only good poll numbers he has, will let Judge break that to you? They're not even good. They're just the best he can have. This dude, this entire administration, they know Americans sick of it. So they're trying to act like they got one thing out of 50. Congratulations. That's still horrible numbers.
Katie, when he first brought the aviators back, and I'm not saying anything disparaging here, I thought it was because he was still sick, and I felt like because he gave that speech while he was suffering from COVID, and I thought, I get it. It might look dark in the eyes from being sick. Let's do this. But Emily Campagno made a really good statement. We don't wear sunglasses in our business because we need to be able to see, the viewer needs to see our eyes. That's how you communicate. He's just putting a wall up between him and the viewer. It's almost like maybe that's part of why he can't tell what's happening in America.
Well, Joe Biden is still deeply unpopular when it comes to his poll numbers. And I'm sure Jessica will argue that his poll numbers are going up in the past couple of weeks, but he's still deeply unpopular. Conveniently, the White House has hid him away from the press during the 1-year anniversary of the Afghanistan withdrawal, which was a total catastrophe. Joe Biden's riding his bike on the beach while Democratic mayors are berating Republicans for sending illegal immigrants to sanctuary cities. They should be having phone calls with Joe Biden about that problem. But the best place for Joe Biden to be really is away from the cameras and away from giving any kind of statements, because when he does, his press shop then has to clean it up, making him look like he's not credible. And if he's really going to have a comeback, you'd think you would see a number of Democrats who are running for election or re-election on the campaign trail in the Senate and the House inviting him to come campaign for him. But instead, they're running as far away as possible from Joe Biden, including in Ohio. And you also have a number of Democrats refusing to say whether he should run again in 2024, including Senator Whitehouse just today. So, Joe Biden's poll numbers go up when he's away from the media. But in terms of successes and answering questions and being transparent about what's going on, they're happy to keep him away from the reporters.
You know, Judge, I guess the media is working really hard to make it look like Joe Biden is just having such a legislative windfall right now. Does the CHIPS Act and this new Green New Deal, does that make up for what happened in Afghanistan a year ago? Does that make up for what's happening at the border? I mean, I get, maybe Democrats didn't think Trump could tout tax cuts as a legislative victory. I don't think Republicans and independents see these as the big legislative wins Democrats say they are.
I don't know any American who's running around saying, thank God that Joe Biden got these legislative wins. Look, first of all, the legislative wins that they talk about, like the Inflation Reduction Act, we know that's a lie. The Congressional Budget Office has said...
they're not calling it that anymore. They're calling it the Green New Deal now, a climate change bill.
Well, but the truth is that that's what it's billed as. That's how they passed the bill. They've lied to us, and all of America knows that that was a lie. And the truth is that this president and this administration are doing everything they can to pursue their own agenda and not the agenda of the American people. And Tyrus is right. This president has taken 150 vacation days. That is 5 months off in a year and 6 or 7 months. That is crazy. He is not capable. And Ron Klain complaining and saying, that Donald Trump, every day there was an S storm that Donald Trump came out. Yeah, there was. You know why? Because he was doing things and the left was going crazy because they objected to it. And in the end, what you've got are the Democrats going crazy every time Donald Trump did something. And the Democrats at this point are saying we've got to build Joe up, even though half of us don't want him to run again, even though most of us don't think the guy is capable of finishing a thought or a sentence, because it's important to us so that we can win.
Jessica, it's a good point. He's been on vacation. I mean, he got elected from the basement, so maybe he can get reelected on vacation. Maybe there's a strategy there. But is this Biden's win? Is this Biden's victory or is this Chuck Schumer's victories?
It's Democrats' victories, and that's the decision that people make. Katie's not wrong. Biden is personally unpopular. He's been inching up. He's now around 40% popularity. But the Democrats, as a party, as the choice of Americans heading into the midterms, are getting increasingly popular. Now it's tied in terms of who's favored to win, to be in charge of Congress. We're favored to win the Senate. Mitch McConnell was caught yesterday, by a reporter, asked about what he thought was going to happen, and he said that they're not likely to take back the Senate. A few months ago, Mitch McConnell felt pretty good about those odds. In terms of who's actually happy about those legislative wins, just an example, diabetics, people who use insulin, for instance. Whip Clyburn shared a story about his now past wife, Emily, who took insulin. She paid $1,200 a month for her doses. This will be down to $35 a month because of the fact that now Medicare can negotiate drug prices.
Do you know
how much of the Inflation Reduction Act?
Do you know how much of that $700 billion is going to go to just that? Just curious. Do you know how much of it is just for the
I know
drugs?
that senior citizens in this country
should we be okay to spend that much money to get one thing that's good?
It's not only one thing that's good.
I have a type 1 diabetic at home, and I have not seen an inch of any of this talking about. And the last thing our doctor told us, it'll be years, and it's going to take lots of loopholes.
I'm just saying. It's unfair to reduce a thing that is unequivocally a good thing to just, it's one good thing. There are a bunch of good things in there, and just because it's not your politics doesn't mean that it doesn't count.
This is
and
about
if you look back,
green energy.
No,
people aren't
it's
ready
about
for
green
it.
energy. It's about saving people's lives. It's making sure that they have health care. Oh, yes, health care saves people's lives. When history looks back at the first 2 years of the Biden term, they will see the American Rescue Act. They will see bipartisan infrastructure, the PACT Act, the CHIPS Act, the Inflation Reduction Act. They will see that al-Zawahiri is dead. They will see record jobs numbers. They will see low unemployment. And I'm not saying that they will say Joe Biden was God's gift to the presidency, but do not reduce what has been accomplished in this term. And Democrats got that done with the slimmest of majorities.
Well, if Democrats are trying to sever themselves from radical progressives, someone needs to let Joe Biden know about that.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.